The Nick Bosa holdout continues from San Francisco 49ers training camp, but what is the date? What is the date the 49ers need Nick Bosa back with the football team to get ready for the 2023 season? A new defensive end in town, and how about the 49ers keeping 4 quarterbacks? Is it even possible? Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker on the socials. Come say hi to us wherever that is, and also in the YouTube comments. The YouTube comments been hot since camp started, by the way, Croc. Shout out to all the everydayers who are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. I want to start this one off, Croc, with the Nick Bosa story. Most people aren't really worried about it. We haven't been worried about it either. We haven't really talked about it very much, but I've called all offseason Nick Bosa the most important player on the football team for the San Francisco 49ers. There were QB wins stats thrown around a lot with Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy W as we called him. But what about Nick W? What about the 49ers record when Nick Bosa is on the football field? It's phenomenal. He is so important to this team. He is the most important player on this football team. So you got to get him in, right? And so clearly negotiations have not been easy. He's going to get a ton of money. It's going to be in the $30+ million per year range. He might end up being the most highly paid non-quarterback in NFL history when this deal is signed. So it's not an easy negotiation. And again, not worried that he's not in camp right now. But as it gets closer, you start to look and say, okay, you don't want to get a guy in so late in camp, even if it's before week 1, that he's running out there and doesn't have, being in shape. He will absolutely be in shape. No worries there. But being in football shape. And you don't want an injury to follow him rushing back and not being in football shape before he hits the field and gets that full complement of snaps, say, in week 1. And you sure as heck don't want him unsigned going into the season and missing regular season football games. So, Croc, I put the question to you here. What's the date? What is that date that the 49ers have to get Nick Bosa back?
I think the scary thing is, and again, we assume, man, they'll get this done. They understand how important this is to the team. The team kind of goes as Nick Bosa goes. But a lot of these other guys that signed even last minute, it was like right before camp started or the day of camp. Was it Deebo Samuel or George Kittle, signed like the day of or right there around then once training camp was started. So it is a little alarming that it hasn't been signed yet. I'd assume that the Bosas are playing a little bit of hardball. And, we saw Joey Bosa do that as well. If I'm not mistaken, Joey Bosa held out to start his rookie year.
He might have held out twice and then again for his big contract that he signed.
Right. So, I mean, these are guys that whether their father is telling them, hey, look, this is what we're going to have to do with this contract negotiation. No matter what, they're going to have to agree to it or we just won't play. And for the 49ers, you hope that's not the case. But Nick Bosa, I'm not starting to get worried yet. But as preseason starts going, I am. And not because I don't think they'll get it done. I like what you said about the injury aspect to it. There's a long history of guys who were holding out and then all of a sudden they come back and then they just have these weird injuries where there's like hamstring or quad tweaks. And Nick Bosa, he's so tightly wound with the way that he's built. He's primed to have that kind of physique, to have some kind of muscle pull or injury like that. So you need to get out there. You need to be able to kind of ramp up with the rest of your team, go 100% against some linemen for a little bit before coming in and playing week 1. Otherwise, I was out all training camp and preseason. Then all of a sudden I jump in there week 1 against Pittsburgh. I go 100%. Your body's just not prepared for that. Again, like you said, great shape. Of course, we expect that. He's shown us nothing but being in amazing shape. But there's football shape as well, like you alluded to. And that's a little bit more difficult to get ready for that, especially if you're going to play every snap.
So there's that extra week now before week 1 happens with the 3 preseason games. You need him to get a week of practice. So I would put the date somewhere a week before the regular season starts. But do you think he needs to get maybe a little preseason work too? Like maybe that week before the last preseason game, get a series or 2 with the starters, then get him out and then have a week, plus of practice to get ready for the regular season. Is that maybe the date?
I don't think he needs a preseason game. I mean, you'll see a lot of teams now who aren't even playing any of their stars in preseason. I think the Rams are kind of starting that where it's like McVay just didn't believe in playing his guys, and they've always been ready. I think just the ramping up part of it is it could be anything, right? It could be watching Nick Bosa against another defensive end in the drills, who's getting off faster, right? Like who's exploding out faster to when that ball, they have the football on the stick, then they move the football, they fire out, right? And they hit the sled, competing against guys doing that's moving 100%.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get that same intensity when you're at home just training by yourself, especially now because his brother, I'm pretty sure, is in camp with the Chargers. So it really is just you and maybe a trainer that you have there that helps you with D-line stuff. So I think you'll be fine without preseason games, but you definitely need that ramp-up period with going 100% against guys in drills. I mean, like that helps you get ready for games as well.
Super important player to the 49ers, and not time to get worried right now, but there is a time to start getting worried because of how valuable Nick Bosa is to the San Francisco 49ers, not just the defense, not just the D-line, but the entire team. We're seeing Steve Wilkes blitzing in practice a lot, working on some different blitz packages. The 49ers signed Taco Charlton this week, former first-round pick of the Dallas Cowboys. Is this a sign that the 49ers are not expecting Nick Bosa back soon? They need another body? Or is this maybe signaling that they didn't like what they saw with the guys that were left over after Bosa was out to start training camp, Croc?
Oh, I think it might have to do something with having extra defensive linemen out there. Remember, I was cut. And the reason I was cut was because, a couple guys got banged up, had some ankle stuff. Joe McKnight had a concussion. Chris Ivory had a high ankle sprain, and they need to be able to release guys from certain areas to make room for these other guys to fill in for that next game. And that was how it happened for me. And you understand the business side of it. I want to say it was Avery, a safety that was waived when Taco Charlton was signed. And it probably had a lot to do with, hey, we're about to get ready for a preseason game. We're about to get ready to go to Las Vegas. Avery, man, you've done a great job, but we don't have Nick Bosa. We need extra defensive linemen. Let's go ahead and, we have enough safeties. We can release the safety and bring in a guy like Taco Charlton to kind of fill in for now.
I didn't even think about it that way. That hits home for you because you went through that exact side of things. And if there would have been some injuries at corner, maybe Croc hangs out for a few years in the NFL instead of that getting the axe during camp. That's pretty wild there, how that roster politics can work for sure, especially when you're fighting for that last spot.
And there's nothing you can do about it. It's not like I can say, oh, no, like release somebody else or, oh, no, I'm ready, because it's not even personal. Yeah. But when you are at the bottom of the roster, you're just a jersey number. You're just 41. You're not Eric Crocker 41. Typically you're expendable. So we saw that with me, and we just saw that with Avery, and it's not personal. I'm pretty sure when they let him go, it's like, hey, if there's an opportunity to bring you back, we'll bring you back. But as of right now, we need to let you go to bring in a guy in another position heading to Vegas. And that was how it happened for me. I'm pretty sure that's how it happened for Avery.
Real quick, Taco Charlton, if you're unfamiliar with his career, 2017, he was a first-round draft pick, 28th overall. We were talking off the air. It was 2 picks before TJ Watt was drafted at the same position. And I remember watching Taco Charlton coming out of Michigan and not being super impressed. He looks the part, 6'6", 270, big, long defensive lineman, just didn't have the twitch and the pass rush ability that I was looking for a draft prospect to give him a super high grade. So I was kind of surprised he was a first round guy for a lot of people. Ended up going 28 overall to Dallas, stuck around in Dallas for 2 years, had his best year, capped out at 5 sacks for the Miami Dolphins, starting 5 of 10 games in 2019, then bounced to Kansas City, then Pittsburgh, and then last year was in Chicago. And look, they didn't have a very deep defensive line. They only appeared in 5 games there. No sacks, half a sack the year before in Pittsburgh. So not a lot of production over the course of 6 NFL seasons. So definitely he's a guy that is just an extra body right now. Maybe the 49ers view him more than that, but I have a feeling no Bosa. They need an extra body. Make sure they have enough guys to play through a preseason game.
Yeah, hurry up, man. Get this Bosa thing done so he could be 100% ready for week 1.
Yeah, we need that.
Again, physically, he'll be ready from I'm in shape. But those injuries, man, those soft tissue injuries that happen from just trying to flip that switch and now all of a sudden go 100%, that's the thing I would kind of keep an eye on.
All right, next, we've gotten some pushback about the quarterback stuff, about potentially trading a guy. If the 49ers need to keep everybody and try as hard as they can to keep all 4 into the regular season. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you do is you add your job to the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Then use simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on just the right candidates with just the right experience and skills so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and eventually hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering high-quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Go to where the candidates are, right at LinkedIn. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Croc. I want to go to a tweet here from a loyal listener, an everydayer, Troy. He says, can't they keep the 4th quarterback on the practice squad? Don't they get to protect so many dudes every week? Yes and no, Troy. You got it half right. Once they get to the practice squad, yes. And then there's been some other folks that have been tagging us on Twitter, on the all the socials, on the comments on our YouTube page, Croc. Some of them a little more angry than others. And a lot of times it's like, you're insane. How could you possibly think about trading Trey Lance? You're crazy. Didn't you see how it went last year? The 49ers need 4 quarterbacks. How could they trade away a quarterback when they saw how things went and they need all the guys they can get? What is your response to that? Because to me, I just don't think it's even in the realm of possibility. And I don't think John Lynch is even considering breaking camp with 4 quarterbacks on the active roster, unless he thinks he's going to be able to trade one of those guys the next day or so. And we've seen the 49ers do some moves like that.
So first, I think we have to identify, why do they have 4 quarterbacks right now? Because typically heading into camp, you have 3, right? 3 that's throwing. One guy was insurance because of Brock Purdy. You weren't 100% sure when he was going to come back. You knew at some point during training camp, he'd be back and he'd be ready and he'll be full go. Everyone can admit that he was a little bit ahead of schedule. So not knowing exactly when he's going to be there, you'd assume, okay, well, if we're not going to have Brock Purdy throwing, we need 3 quarterbacks in practice throwing the ball. And that's what you see every offseason.
Yeah. And Croc, Kyle Shanahan has talked about it when free agency happened. Brock Purdy's going to go under the knife, and Trey Lance still hadn't been cleared yet. So you're rolling into free agency. They had 0 healthy quarterbacks at that moment.
All right. So you sign Sam Darnold, you sign Allen, and now, okay, I know at the very least heading into training camp, I have 3 quarterbacks with good arms. Obviously, assuming Trey Lance would be cleared, which he was cleared and ready for OTAs.
Mm-hmm.
So during the offseason, you typically have 3 quarterbacks. We had that when I was with the Jets. It was Geno Schutz. Even before they drafted Geno Smith, there was Mark Sanchez, David Garrard, and Sims, Matt Sims, Chris Sims' little brother.
Oh, okay.
So then I think they ended up waiving Garrard, but you ended up drafting Geno Smith. So you still had 3 quarterbacks, right? Now, the 49ers are in an intriguing situation because they were planning on 3 to start training camp, but then Brock Purdy was cleared before training camp started. So now all of a sudden you have 4 quarterbacks. And they like some of the things they've seen from Brandon Allen. Like, do you just waive him right now And, one of our listeners talked about, oh, well, can't you just put a fourth one on practice squad? Well, you can't, but he has to clear. And one thing about Allen, even though he's kind of disrespected by the 49er fan base, he has been the number 2 for Cincinnati for a while. So if you let him go, if he shows anything in training camp and in preseason games, and you let him go, he's not going to clear waivers to be able to come back onto your practice squad. Most likely he's not.
Right. Yeah. So if all 4 of the quarterbacks that are in camp right now are on the 49ers roster in September when the season starts, it's because Allen cleared waivers. Nobody picked him up. Nobody signed him, and he wanted to sign back with the 49ers, work with Shanahan, work on the 49ers staff as the 4th quarterback, but the practice squad quarterback. I find that very unlikely that a team wouldn't snap him up and put him on their 53. And even if, and here's another angle of it too. So let's say another team keeps only 2 quarterbacks on their active roster, and they need the 3rd quarterback on the practice squad. Well, there's one less guy to climb over to get a chance to play if you're Brandon Allen.
Right.
So the worst situation you could be in is the practice squad quarterback when there's 3 guys already on the 53-man roster of that team. So I find it impossible to believe that, nearly impossible to believe, if anybody, it would be Allen that would be available for the 49ers on the practice squad. And I'm actually, now that I think about it, a little surprised the 49ers didn't try to go the undrafted quarterback route with the last quarterback, just to have a guy that they were getting ready to be, what Brock Purdy was last year, what Brandon Allen has been in the past, that a guy that you can hide a little bit easier on the practice squad, because it might be more difficult with Brandon Allen. And he's the cheapest. So if you're going to trade a guy away, and you might as well save a few $1 million and keep Brandon Allen as the 3rd and trade one of the other guys.
And that's what we expected them to do, right?
Yes.
Sign a veteran, have an undrafted guy, because the undrafted guy is just a lot easier to hide. Right now, I find it, unless you move off of Sam Darnold or Trey Lance, and we can talk about how that can kind of come to fruition, I just don't see a scenario where Allen ends up on your practice squad. And if he does, that is a kind of a miracle, a little bit. I don't want to say a miracle, anything can happen, but that's something that I wouldn't anticipate happening. I would assume that if he does well in preseason games, which let's say he doesn't do well in preseason games, then why would you want him as your 4th quarterback on practice squad anyways?
Right. Yeah, that's true.
And they're anticipating him doing well. Kyle Shanahan says he likes him. He had a good practice the other day, completing 4 out of his 4 passes. He's getting the least amount of reps than anyone. I would assume someone would say, you know what? We need that 3rd quarterback, because now you can carry that 3rd guy. So I don't anticipate him being able to return, but anything's possible. He's kind of disrespected with the way he's talked about by fans, though. It's like, oh, that bum, why is he getting any reps? It's like, man, he's probably looking like, dude, I've been in number 2 for the last 4 years.
He's doing exactly what Brock Purdy did in last training camp. Nobody gave Brock Purdy any credit to be like, even the people that liked him. Like, I'm trying to think of who like Larry Kruger, I think really liked him. Larry Kruger always loves all the undrafted guys. I love Larry, and he's passionate about the late rounders, the undrafted guys. He loved Purdy, but he wasn't like, oh, Purdy's going to go undefeated and be the unquestioned starter coming into the following season. I mean, you'd have to have your head examined to expect that. But you could have liked him and be like, oh, I like Purdy. Purdy should stick. Purdy should be on the roster as the number 3. And in a similar, and physically, he's not that far off. He's closer to Brandon Allen physically than he is Darnold or Trey Lance, right? So you shouldn't disrespect what Brandon Allen is, someone that could come in and, look, if you're on your 3rd quarterback, disasters have happened, right? And so you just need a guy that can not lose you games and that can run the offense and can, throw in timing and knows what the calls are and can get you in and out of a huddle. And Brandon Allen can do that. And so, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Brandon Allen ends up playing games and it looks like Nick Mullins, for a couple of games, right? Like he's that type of quarterback. And clearly Kyle Shanahan has liked what he's seen from him. To me, when it comes to a head, is once Purdy gets cleared to be practicing every day and he doesn't need that extra day off, because you can't do anything now until then for sure. But once that happens, and then now you're into the preseason games, then maybe the 49ers can start to think about doing something, and they'll be like, okay, well, Allen's our 4th guy, so that's the guy we'll try to get a conditional 7th in 2025 for, or whatever, and just do that early, and then have the other 3 guys get all the reps and all the training camp and all the preseason game snaps. So maybe that's the way they go about it, or maybe they wait and they can get more and shed more salary by trading away Trey Lance or trading away Sam Darnold. And to me, that's the way to go. Whichever of those guys is going to be your third quarterback, or if a team's willing to break the tie for you for between number 2 and number 3 and give you something in trade, I think it's the more likely way to go for the 49ers and really the best way to go for the 49ers. And for Trey Lance, if he's not going to get a chance to play, he'll probably want to be somewhere else. So that might be a factor in all of this as well.
With a lot of this, I never know how Kyle Shanahan, like exactly how he's looking at it. So right now, if you look at the stats that are flowing around social media from training camp practices, the attempts and completions and all that type of stuff, Trey Lance has the highest completion percentage out of all the quarterbacks. And it's even higher if you just take out, because some people are like, well, he's going against the twos. When you kind of look at the ones where, because he had 2 practices where he was going with the ones and going against the first defense. He has, I mean, even if you just use those 2 practices, it's far and away the highest completion percentage. That does not mean, in Kyle Shanahan's eyes, he's playing the best. So when we look at Brandon Allen, and maybe he doesn't have as high of a completion percentage, or, man, he's had some ugly days, he might do certain things that Kyle Shanahan holds higher in regard, like higher than just a completion percentage.
Yeah, knowing where to go with the ball, throwing, timing, and rhythm. Yeah.
Right. So we might think like, oh man, it's not looking great, or oh man, he's not doing this, and Kyle might be like, well, I don't care, because when I talk to him, he does these things well. He sets this up. I like the way he talks to the other quarterbacks. He'd be the perfect third string quarterback. Like that, and I think that just might be how he thinks, which is why he kept Brock Purdy over last year, 209 legend. Nate Sudfeld, right? All right, shout out to the 209 legend, shout out Modesto. But that's at practice, it didn't look like Brock Purdy was better than Nate Sudfeld. Like, just from my eyes, it looked like, oh, Nate Sudfeld, he's back there. He looks tall. He's slinging it. He's completing passes. Got in the Packers game. He's throwing touchdowns. Like, he probably had to throw the preseason game, the throw of the preseason on that long throw to the sideline against the Vikings. I mean, it was like a beautiful throw. Some of y'all might remember it. And it was like, nope, Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy clearly was doing something that Kyle held in higher regards than anything that we saw. So you never know. I just say that as it pertains to Brandon Allen and how he might be viewing him, because the way he's talked about, that I see people are like just kind of dismissing him, and maybe he does just get let go and nobody blinks an eye. But Kyle, you never know how he's seeing it.
All right, more notes from camp, and an ex-49er retiring with 0 career games played in the regular season of the NFL. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. August is here, and you know what that means? The official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball and Underdog Fantasy. All you do is one live snake draft, no waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. That's Best Ball, and it's super fun. It's a way to get a lot of drafts under your belt in August, getting ready for that home league draft. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back, and even bigger, with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code LOCKEDON to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKEDON for your doubled first deposit up to $100. And Croc, I know you can vouch for Underdog Fantasy. You've done a lot of work for them in the past, and the best ball drafts are awesome and super fun this time of year.
Not just the best ball drafts, but they have the pick'ems, which is in Andrew. He's kind of over a lot of that stuff. He'll tell you that's Croc's favorite thing. Man, you guys go ahead, and when you download the app or go to UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code Locked On, go to pick'ems, and right now they're not going to have it for too much longer. They have the season-long pick'ems, where if you think that George Kittle is going to have more than 700 yards, choose the higher. All right. If you think Deebo Samuel is going to have more than 800 receiving yards, choose higher. If you think Brock Purdy is going to have more than, and I would have to look at all the numbers right now. These are kind of fake numbers, but if you download the website, you guys will see all of that. That's, and then they have that weekly. Weekly, you get to do the higher and lower with the players and things like that. Put it all together and make you some money. So I love the Underdog Fantasy app.
There you go. Best Ball Mania is on. Get your deposit doubled. That's Underdog Fantasy promo code Locked On. All right, kind of a sad story here and a bummer, and something that we thought had already happened, but Jalen Hurd last week, a couple weeks ago to start camp, he had signed with the New England Patriots. But man, the only news is bad news when it comes to Jalen Hurd and his NFL football playing career. Jalen Hurd has been placed on the reserve retired list by the New England Patriots, so his training camp doesn't even get started, and now officially retired again is Jalen Hurd. I don't think his retirement was official the last time. He was the third round pick for the 49ers in 2019 and has never had a chance to play. He had that one preseason game, and everyone was so hyped in 2019. He had 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter versus the Dallas Cowboys in the preseason, tore ACL, and then that was it. And never,
back injury, ACL the next year.
Career never got off the ground.
You typically don't see it happen like that. That's very unfortunate, especially for a guy, big receiver, and the fact that he kind of battled back to have an opportunity with the Patriots, and then now he has to retire. I read that, and I'm just like, man, no way. You kind of feel bad for the guy, if he really put in a lot of work, and I'd assume he did, just to have those workouts. I know what those workouts are like, and working out for the New England Patriots, from what I understand, are even more difficult than any other workout. So he had to be in some type of shape. He had to be ready for that. He had the opportunity. We saw the touchdown catch by him floating around social media, and then the next thing you know, he retired. So it's a bummer for Jalen Hurd.
That is a bummer. And clearly he's a physically talented guy. I mean, a guy who's 6'5", SEC running back, and then turns to, this big slot receiver, and you could see that suddenness in the short area. He wasn't necessarily a burner down the field, but he was big. He had what seemed like natural hands in his conversion to wide receiver that happened already in college before he was drafted. And I think it could have been a real nice fit for what that positionless football that Kyle Shanahan wanted to run. And you could see now, looking back, what his visions probably were for him. Some combination of, Debo, Juwan Jennings, right? Big slot. You could do a lot run after catch stuff with him. Who knows? Maybe he would have been part of the wide back committee as well. But unfortunately, never happened for Jalen Hurd.
Again, super unfortunate. I haven't seen anything like that with the injuries and whatnot, but unique skill set. I had some buddies, we were kind of going back and forth on I don't even know what to call it. Do you call it Twitter still? It's like X. I don't even know what to call it.
I don't even know. I'm exhausted by Twitter.
On the Elon Musk app, we had some buddies going back and forth, and one guy was, he shouldn't have been, drafted. He was so raw. I'm like, you know what? I think he was not as raw as people think. I think it's just because he was a running back and converted to receiver. It's like, he's just this raw talent. And I saw a guy who understood leverage and was getting in and out of his breaks, and you just see the change of direction, especially for a guy that's 6'4", almost 6'5", 230 pounds. He had the quicks. His 3-cone, if I'm not mistaken, was like a 6'8". So, to have that kind of change of direction for that big of a body, he showed it. And then, like you said, man, looking at what he probably would have been with the 49ers, looking at Juwan Jennings, because he wasn't a straight line speed guy, but he had a, decent, 4.66, 40-yard dash, but his ability to kind of win underneath, and then what he could have been run after catch. And then we see now the end around and lining up Debo Samuel in the backfield, and not as explosive as Debo, especially straight line, but being able to do some of those physical things, man, that would have been nice. And now I could see him having Jalen Hurd in the backfield next to the quarterback, and then Debo Samuel doing that moon motion behind, and am I going to hand off to him, fake it to Jalen Hurd, flip it back to Debo Samuel, and just on top of the receiver stuff that they could have done, that would have been really fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. One quick note here, Croc, and I found your tweet with the specific numbers, because you mentioned earlier about Trey Lance and his work with the ones. Yeah. Trey Lance, 9 of 13, 69% as a passer, 1 passing touchdown, 1 rushing touchdown, and 0 interceptions running with the ones in those 2 practices when Brock Purdy was resting. So
there was some context left out of the original tweet. All right. Yeah. So the original tweet just showed all the quarterback stats, and it said, disclaimer, all Brock Purdy's stats were going against the ones. And it was kind of to, I guess, kind of put down anything else that anybody else is kind of doing, or as to why they might be lower.
Yeah, to make his 62% or whatever seem better. And, to be honest with you, so Brock Purdy's thrown 2 interceptions in camp and some dropped interceptions. I feel like this is the fewest camp interceptions ever. To have 3 quarterbacks that haven't thrown a pick yet in camp is kind of wild.
Yeah, it's really wild, especially when you watch, because it doesn't look like Sam Darnold, Trey Lance, or even Allen are just being like, oh, we're trying to be so super safe and conservative with how we're throwing the ball. They're throwing the ball downfield. They're trying to fit into tight spots. They just haven't thrown the pick. Trey Lance has had 1 dropped. I know that for sure. But
well, who leads the 49ers training camp in picks?
Kyle Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan. He had at least 4 picks in the one practice that we were both at together.
Yeah. Now here's the thing, and I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. I added Trey Lance's stats just because it was like disclaimer, and they kind of excluded that. So I wanted to add that bit of context. But in my opinion, none of that matters. I understand from the engagement standpoint, because all the fans are like kind of thirsty for that. What's the completions and incompletions after a practice? But all that matters is this guy seeing the field and doing the things that Kyle Shanahan wants. So you can probably complete 50% of your passes in practice. Now, again, in the games, you want to be more efficient, but you can complete 50% of them. But if you're doing the things what Kyle wants you to do, and there's some misses in the process, that's fine. You know why? Because just like quarterbacks are getting up to speed and they're working and things like that, the receivers are too. You have no idea how many times these guys have probably run the wrong route. Or, they're supposed to be there. And a big part of Kyle Shanahan's offense, and we hear that on the Play Callers podcast show, that you have to trust that this guy is going to be there. So if you are expecting this guy to be there, and this is 3rd string receiver or 2nd string receiver that hasn't been with the Niners long, and he doesn't run it to the right depth or right area, and you just throw the rock and it's incomplete or even picked off, Kyle's not going to get on the quarterback. He's going to get on the receiver. And that's why I have such an issue with the completion percentage stuff. And it looks good for Trey Lance. He's completed the highest percentage passes out of any of these guys. But to me, that doesn't say, oh, he's playing the best. Now, he might be playing the best. I mean, I've watched him and I think he looks fine. I think he looks good. But what I think looks good and what Kyle Shanahan is looking for, probably 2 different things.
Yep. And it might not even show up as much in those throws in camp as it might show up on the whiteboard, before, after practice. Why'd you do this? What do you do this in the meeting rooms? And that might be an area where, Purdy was awesome last year. We didn't quite see it in camp. That might be an area where Brandon Allen is awesome right now. And you might not see it with some of the throws he's making. He's not wowing you with throws in camp, but he knows where to go with the ball, throwing in rhythm, stepping up in the pocket when he needs to, those types of things. So there's a lot that goes into it. And just looking at completion percentage from practice is not enough context.
We were talking about my guy. I keep saying my guy, Guy Haberman, and he has this kind of grading scale, and he's trying to tweak it. He's trying to get it down to a perfect science. All right, but he's grading throws based on like a golf score. All right, and I said, you know what? Maybe I'll try something like that. I'll go more the PFF route while I'm out there tomorrow watching the 40, or as you guys listen to it, it'd be today. But he's grading it based on if it's like a really good throw, then it's like a birdie. But it would have to be like a great throw to be a birdie. Like, man, highly difficult throw, that's a birdie. If it's a regular throw, like, I don't think he's grading that. But if it's a really bad throw, then depending on how bad, it could be like a bogey or a double bogey to kind of minus. And then at the end of it, he gives like a 2 over par, or this quarterback is par. So it kind of adds it up. And to me, if we're talking about how well these quarterbacks are doing, at least just in the sense of what it looks like with the difficulties of throws, that's a better way to do it. Because I told you, when I was at one of the practices recently, matter of fact, it was Monday, I thought Brock Purdy got sacked 4 times, and then out of the sack, he just dumped it off to the side, and he did that 4 times and completed all 4. Well, what does that do? That inflates his completion percentage to everybody, but gives 0 context. It's just you just dump it off to this guy at the line of scrimmage. That doesn't tell me that you're practicing well. What was well? the highly difficult throw, falling back and throwing to the sideline to Deebo Samuel. That was a throw. So I put a lot more into that one throw than I do any of those 4 checkdowns. And I feel like that's how they should be graded.
Yep. That's the old. Well, it's actually still the way that they grade at PFF. They give you plus minuses per play, and you get up to a +2 on a play if it's spectacular, -2 on a terrible play. So it is kind of like the reverse golf score thing. So I like that. Yeah, and then you can start normalizing the pluses and minuses, Croc, into a number grade, like a Madden grade, like PFF started doing. And then people can get so mad at you because you're like, oh, this is a 65. It's like, what, a 65? What are you talking about? So I can't wait for Croc's grades.
Between that one throw by Brock, falling back, throwing, kind of like flipping it out there, and that Trey Lance throw where and then we've kind of seen it on social media, but I remember seeing it live where it looked like it kind of wrapped around the defensive line and the offensive line, then kind of went through, and it was like low and away from the defender. The defender was on the receiver's back, arms stretched out, couldn't get to it. He threw it to the only spot. Like that's a birdie. you know what I'm saying? Like that, you can't look at a completion percentage or a completion and see that type of throw should not be graded the same or taken into the same account as a check down or a screen. They are not equal.
Croc will be at camp Thursday. I'll be at camp, I believe, with Croc at least one day this weekend as well. So if you see us there, say hi. Appreciate everybody making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.
Subscribe to this video.